Senator, yay.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Do you want to sign a This just goes over. No. Thank you.
Right. How are you, sir?
How are you doing?
I'm
Welcome.
Gary Jenkins. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming out, son.
Thank you, sir. All the great work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right. We all set and ready to roll, everybody? Senator, you met a lot of people here talking about the Veterans Administration. Of course, you're here for the Concerned Veterans for America. What's your thought on all of the people?
Well, listen, the veterans community here in San Angelo, throughout Texas, is extraordinary. And one of the great things about our state is that we value and we treasure our active duty military, and we value and treasure our veterans. There's no state in the Union like Texas. And I spent the afternoon at Goodfellow, and the community's love and support for Goodfellow is enormous, and it's powerful. And this was, I think, a really productive town hall where we discussed a lot of the issues facing veterans. Front and center, the VA and the care that the VA is providing, or far too often not providing, and how to provide more accountability to ensure that veterans receive the care that they have earned and that they deserve. And also how to give veterans more choice, so that every veteran, it should be your choice what doctor you see. And I think that's the most potent tool for improving the standards of care in the VA.
Are you here, are you free to talk about any other issue, or are you just it's strictly the veterans?
I'm happy to answer whatever questions you like.
Let's talk about the immigration issue.
Yeah.
As you know, President Trump separated young children from their parents and then he reversed.
And so I've introduced legislation in the Senate that would mandate that families stay together, that would mandate that kids stay with their mom or their dad, but also at the same time that would enforce our immigration laws. One of the things we saw is a number of congressional Democrats who use this issue to get behind legislation that would effectively mandate releasing everyone, releasing the adults who are apprehended crossing illegally. And that's clearly a mistake. Going back to the failed policies of catch and release, it doesn't work. It only encourages more and more illegal immigration, which is not the right solution. I can tell you in the past several weeks I've been negotiating with Democratic senators, most notably Dianne Feinstein from California. And my hope is we can find common ground, that if we can get behind, and we've been negotiating back and forth on legislative text on the bill that I've introduced, if we can get behind those two simple propositions, keep families together and enforce the law, then we'll have legislation that passes. If on the other hand, congressional Democrats decide they want to play politics with this issue, then they'll block this bill from passing. I hope they don't do that.
One more final question, unless other people jump in here. As you know, President Trump has imposed tariffs on foreign nations, and that's causing kind of an uproar and upsetting the cart a little bit. Your comment on that?
Well, as I travel the state, as I listen to business leaders throughout the state, as I listen to farmers and ranchers throughout the state, trade is the single biggest concern I hear from the business community, from farmers and ranchers. Small business owners, farmers and ranchers are thrilled with the tax cut. The tax cut has been enormously beneficial, especially to Texas and the Texas economy. And they're also thrilled with regulatory reform, pulling back the Obama-era job-killing regulations that were hammering oil and gas, that were hammering agriculture. But the biggest area of concern is trade, and I share that concern. Let's take something like NAFTA renegotiation. That could be a good thing or bad thing, depending on what the objective is. If the objective of NAFTA renegotiation is to expand access to the Mexican markets, to the Canadian markets, to increase trade, that will be good. That will be good for Texas, good for farmers, good for ranchers, good for manufacturers, good for small businesses. If, on the other hand, the intention is to erect barriers to trade, impose tariffs, and shut down international trade, that will be bad for Texas. That will hurt Texas and hurt the country. And so I have made this case emphatically to the President, that we should be expanding trade. And in fact, I think the single greatest opportunity for NAFTA renegotiation is energy, opening up the Mexican energy markets. You know, Mexico has vast oil and gas reserves. Many of them are not being developed adequately because of their legal and political system down there. If we use NAFTA renegotiation to open that up, that'll produce thousands of good-paying jobs in Mexico. That helps grow their middle class, which is good for Mexico. But naturally, the place they'll turn for the expertise to develop that oil and gas is Texas. And so that'll produce thousands of high-paying jobs here in Texas. That is a win-win. At this point, I don't know which direction the administration is going to go. There are, candidly, conflicting voices on the administration on both sides of the issue, but I have leaned in repeatedly with the President, urging that we open up our access to foreign markets so that Texas farmers and ranchers and manufacturers can export. And if we're competing on a fair and level playing field, Texans, I believe, can outcompete anyone in the world.
Senator, you mentioned about the Army Futures Command competition between Austin, North Carolina, and Boston, Massachusetts.
Yes.
Would you clarify for me what exactly in concrete is going on, and if a decision has been made, when will one be made, and how does it look for Austin?
Right. So the decision's been made.
Okay.
The Army has announced the Army Futures Command will be in Austin. And so they're moving forward. They're standing it up. And in fact, we've got the formal opening coming up relatively soon that I'm planning to be there for it. But they had an extended competition, and it's something that I engaged energetically and really made the case for Texas that Austin was the right place for the command to be headquartered. And this is something that will bring billions of dollars to the state of Texas, that will bring new jobs, that will bring high-paying jobs, high-tech jobs. And the case that I made to the Army, I leaned in directly with the Secretary of the Army, with the Undersecretary of the Army, and the case I made was that of the cities they were looking at, of the locations they were looking at, that there was no place that combined the talent pool coming in Austin, coming out of the University of Texas, of young scientists and engineers and mathematicians, exactly the sorts of young men and women you want to be doing the high-tech innovation for the future of the Army, the modernizing of the Army, combined with an already robust high-tech community of startups that are growing, combined with the incredible commitment to the military the state of Texas has. There is no state in the country, I believe, that loves the military, that loves and cherishes and stands up for our active duty military and our veterans like Texas does. And I think that combination is what was compelling to the Army, and so I'm very glad they made that decision.
And moving forward, when's that going to be made as far as moving forward taking place?
They are in the process of standing it up right now. So they've made the announcement and they're just moving forward. So we can get you actually the exact...
August 24th is the ribbon cutting.
Oh, August 24th is the ribbon cutting. I knew it was coming up soon, so August 24th.
Thank you.
Senator, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So you said that you want to see the reunification of immigrant families. However, they have separated them due to the illegality of them coming here. If you want to see them reunified, but you disagree with them coming illegally and you don't want that, how do you go forward and see them be unified and being, I guess, happy in the United States?
So the legislation that I filed mandates that families stay together, kids stay with their parents. But it also mandates that we enforce the law. So what it would allow for is you keep the entire family together in a secure detention facility. You then, this legislation doubles the number of federal immigration judges, so you expedite their cases. If they have a valid claim for asylum under U.S. law, that claim gets processed quickly. If they can meet the standards, it gets granted. If they don't have a valid claim, and many of them do not have a valid claim, then that claim gets denied and denied quickly, and you send the entire family, the parents and the kids, back to their home country if they don't meet the standard for asylum. Instead of having the process drag on for months and even years, the legislation I introduced would expedite it and provide the resources to have an adjudication one way or the other. And I think that really, it respects the rule of law, but it also recognizes what we can all recognize, which is that kids should be with their parents. And so we can do both.
And I watched your research and gathering, and you said it's very rare for a Republican president to have a Republican majority in the House. You said it happened, I think, 6 times. Being that this is a red state and that you are very close to the like I saw the polls, it's like a 2-point difference. Are you in any way worried that we could turn into a blue state?
Absolutely. Look, this election is hard fought. The biggest political challenge that my campaign has is complacency. And I get asked every day, oh, come on, this is a Texas reelect. How can this possibly be competitive? And the answer is simple. The far left, they're energized right now. They're angry. Many of them hate the president. And we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing millions and millions of dollars that they're contributing to Democrats all over the country, including my Democratic opponent, Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who is the #1 Democratic fundraiser in the country, because liberals in Hollywood and all over the country are pouring millions into his campaign. That energy, we underestimated our peril. Now, the good news is there are a whole lot more conservatives than liberals in Texas. This is Texas. The danger is not that a bunch of conservatives wake up suddenly and vote Democrat. I don't think that's likely to happen. The danger is that too many conservatives stay home. That either complacency or you're disillusioned or you're bickering amongst ourselves and people stay home. And that is how Texas turns blue. Now, I don't believe Texas will turn blue, but politically, my job is very simple, which is turn conservatives out. Turn out, turn out, turn out. And I'd say not just conservatives, I'd say Texans who value freedom. Look, the basic values we believe in as Texans are low taxes, low regulations, lots and lots of jobs, higher wages, more opportunity. The Texas economy is booming because we've cut taxes and reduced regulations. That's good for Texas. We want to see our borders secured. We don't want to see open borders like Congressman O'Rourke is pushing for. And we want to see our constitutional rights protected, the Bill of Rights protected. Those are common sense values. And so for every Texan that wants to see those values protected, we need to show up and vote. And I'm confident that's what we're going to do.
And just one more question, and I'll move on to you, sorry. So with the agriculture trade war that is starting, do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? And how, going forward, if you disagree, would you change it?
Well, we visited about that just a minute ago in one of the earlier questions. I support trade. That farmers, ranchers, manufacturers in Texas, we do great when we're trading on a fair and level playing field. And so I have urged the president, don't get in a trade war. Now, I think it is very beneficial that President Trump is leaning in with China to get them to lower their tariffs and lower their trade barriers. China does not compete in a fair way with us, and I think it's good to have a president willing to stand up to China. President Obama didn't do that, we got taken advantage of. So I think that's beneficial. But what I've urged the president is use this to lower tariffs and expand trade. That's what's going to help Texas. I hope that's the direction the administration goes. I don't know, but I hope it will, and I'll tell you, what I hear from farmers and ranchers all the time, you know, I was very proud to receive the endorsement of the Texas Farm Bureau. And the reason the Texas Farm Bureau endorsed my re-election is because I've been fighting for farmers and ranchers, fighting for regulations pulled back. For example, the Waters of the United States rule, which the Obama administration had put in place, was hugely harmful to Texas agriculture. Another example is as part of the tax bill, we doubled the exemption from the death tax. That exempted farms and ranches all over Texas who otherwise might have been forced to sell the farm when the owners passed away, rather than keep the farm and the family and keep producing. All of those are big improvements. But at the same time, I don't want to see a trade war hurt Texans, and so I'm going to continue urging the president to go in the direction of expanding trade and not constricting trade.
Senator, what's the status of the HHS plan to house immigrant children in Goodfellow and at Fort Bliss?
Yeah. I don't know the exact status. I spent a considerable amount of time with the leadership at Goodfellow, and they are preparing to be able to stand up a detention facility if the decision is made to house unaccompanied children there. My understanding is that decision has not been made as a definite decision, so the leadership at Goodfellow doesn't know if that's going to happen or not, but they have the land set aside of where the detention facilities would be stood up. And it's one of the real tragedies. You know, we've seen in recent months the press covering kids being detained. And listen, I've visited many detention facilities. I was down in Brownsville a number of weeks ago visiting detention facilities that had kids who came in. But you know, this year was not the first year that I visited detention facilities. I also visited facilities in 2013 and 2014 under President Obama. All the Democrats that are bringing a bunch of reporters and showing up suddenly and saying, can you believe kids are being detained? When you had tens of thousands of kids being detained under President Obama, they somehow didn't think it was an issue. And if you look at it, I mean, the statistics are really quite striking. If you go back to 2010, 2011, there were roughly 6,000 unaccompanied kids that came to this country illegally. Then in June of 2012, President Obama issued DACA, executive amnesty, where he granted amnesty to people who came as kids. Now, the predictable effect of that, if you grant amnesty to people who come as kids, it incentivized a lot more kids coming. And so we saw suddenly an incredible explosion of children coming here illegally. It went from 6,000 to, in 2014, 90,000 unaccompanied children coming into this country. And so, just a couple of days ago, I was down at Lackland Air Force Base. Back in 2014, Lackland Air Force Base, they set up a detention facility under the Obama administration for unaccompanied kids. And it's worth noting, these kids that are coming in, they're not being brought by well-meaning social workers. They are being brought in by vicious criminal cartels, human traffickers. Many of these children are subject to physical abuse, subject to sexual abuse. Nobody who cares about compassion, nobody who cares about humanity, should want any little boy or any little girl in the custody of human traffickers. And in my view, the policies of many congressional Democrats that encourage illegal immigration only ensures that more and more kids will be abused by the traffickers. And my view on immigration, I think this is a common sense view most Texans support. I can sum up in 4 words. Legal, good. Illegal, bad. That we need to secure the border and stop illegal immigration. We can do that. And at the same time, welcome and celebrate legal immigrants who wait in line and follow the rules. My dad was an immigrant. He came from Cuba in 1957, but he came the right way. That's the way our system is meant to work, and I think that's where the Texans agree. And I would note, there is no race in the country on which there is a starker difference on immigration than the U.S. Senate race here in Texas. A couple of months ago, I was very proud to receive the endorsement of the National Border Patrol Council. That is the union of Border Patrol agents all along the border, the men and women on the front lines defending our border. And the Border Patrol Council typically doesn't get involved in elections. They're a labor union, they normally stay out of it. But every union president from each sector got on a plane and flew to McAllen to formally endorse me, because they said out of 100 senators, that I was the one who was standing and fighting with them, fighting to stop illegal immigration, to secure the border, and to defend the men and women who risked their lives to secure the border. Now, in contrast, my opponent in this race, Congressman Beto O'Rourke, he isn't doing what most Democrats do in a Texas general election. He's not pretending to run to the middle. He is running hard left. So on immigration, he opposes the wall. He says we should tear down the fences and walls we have right now on the border, that we have too many. He supports sanctuary cities. And just a few weeks ago, he said that he is, quote, open to abolishing ICE, abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. When he got pressed back on that, he doubled down and said, well, maybe we shouldn't just abolish ICE, maybe we should also abolish the Department of Homeland Security, the entire department. Now that is just a radical view. Just a few weeks ago, nobody in the Democratic Party would have suggested that, and then we saw a socialist win a primary up in New York. And suddenly, liberals nationwide have been galloping over to saying, abolish the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. I think that's an extreme and radical position. It's very much out of step with Texas. And so, on immigration and just about every other issue, there's a stark divide, and I'm confident that where Texans are, we believe in common sense. We understand low taxes, low regulation produces jobs. We want to keep this boom going. We didn't like when President Obama waged war on the energy industry, waged war on oil and gas, pounded Texas farmers and ranchers. Congressman O'Rourke wants to go back to all of those job-killing regulations. That's not where Texans are. And in fact, Congressman O'Rourke is now the only Democratic Senate nominee in the country to come out explicitly for impeaching President Trump. And he said categorically he would vote yes to impeach Trump. That again, is a radical and extreme position. Bernie Sanders doesn't say that. Elizabeth Warren doesn't say that. Nancy Pelosi doesn't say that. But Beto O'Rourke does. And that doesn't reflect who we are as Texas. Yes, sir. Last question.
Somos la única media en español en esta parte de West Texas. Usted ha hablado de dos temas muy importantes. Una es la economía, pero estamos cerrando la oportunidad a traer trabajadores extranjeros cuando no hay una mano de obra local que quiera hacer el trabajo para este país.
I appreciate that question y entiendo casi todo, pero no puedo hablar como yo quería.
You can speak.
And so I'll answer in English instead,
Right,
which is that you're certainly right that we need to have a legal immigration system that responds to our labor needs and responds to the needs of farmers and ranchers, where in agriculture there are enormous demands. And we need to be bringing people in not to compete with Americans for jobs, but to fill the needs where we have real needs in our employment market. And one of the problems, it's a shame on immigration that the issue is so politicized, so polarized. The rhetoric, and to be honest, the rhetoric on both sides of the issue is often extreme and overheated. And the environment we have right now, when you've got Democrats talking about abolishing ICE, it means that we can't actually enact legislation through Congress because it faces a Democratic filibuster that would secure the border, that would improve and streamline our legal system. My hope is we'll do that. And I have worked to do that, but in the current deeply polarized political environment where Senate Democrats are right now, is their base is demanding obstruct, fight, resist. And so you saw we had a number of different immigration bills on the Senate floor just recently, and every one of them got filibustered. And so I think going forward, long term, I'm optimistic that we can find a solution that makes sense. But it is going to take a return to common sense and not the extreme positions of the Democrats of saying essentially don't enforce our immigration laws and encourage illegal immigration. That doesn't make sense. All right, thank you guys.
Senator, could I ask you about your bill in regards to designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization? Where does this stand currently?
Well, I think it's the right thing to do. It's legislation that I've introduced that would designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. I think the facts are clear that the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization.
Yes.
In fact, if you look at a number of the Arab countries in the Middle East, they've designated the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. America has not yet. I hope that we will.
Yeah.
I'm continuing to press. We haven't had a vote on this particular bill in the Senate. I continue to press for a vote. And I continue to urge the President and urge the administration to move forward with designating the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the right thing to do. I will say this also. For 8 years under Barack Obama, we saw radical Islamic terrorism spread, and spread at a dramatic level. And I chaired a hearing in the Senate on the willful blindness of the Obama administration. And in fact, we heard testimony from a whistleblower at the Department of Homeland Security, how DHS engaged in a purge, and purge is the word
Correct.
they used at the direction of the Obama White House. The Obama White House ordered them to modify or delete over 800 records
Yes.
to remove any reference to Muslim Brotherhood, to jihad. And that purge, that willful blindness left us vulnerable. We saw terrorist attack
Yes. San
after terrorist
Bernardino
attack.
and Florida and the Boston Marathon are all results of that.
Nadal Hassan at Fort Hood. And I am very gratified that under the Trump administration, they are focused clear-eyed on this problem. That has improved dramatically.
Good.
And beyond that, look, I will say, we went from ISIS having a nation state and massive oil reserves to fund their terror to almost totally defeating ISIS. They've lost virtually all of their territory. Now, they remain a dangerous terrorist organization, but no longer with a nation state behind them. That's a major victory
Yes.
because the Trump administration focused on defeating them. And I will say, one of the first big legislative victories that I had in the Senate, and one of the ones that remains among the most meaningful to me, came out of Fort Hood and the terrorist attack at Nadal Hassan. You'll recall that the Obama administration refused to acknowledge that that attack was a terrorist attack.
Yes.
Instead, they categorized it as workplace violence.
Yeah.
And so the consequence of that, for the 14 innocent souls who were murdered that day, they were not eligible for the Purple Heart. Because if it was workplace violence, then it was not an injury in the course of defending this nation.
Yes.
I introduced legislation in the U.S. Senate to mandate that those soldiers who were murdered by Nadal Hassan at Fort Hood would receive the Purple Heart because it was radical Islamic terrorism striking here at home. In the Senate Armed Services Committee, I've served on that committee for 6 years, the Obama Defense Department fought vigorously against that legislation. They opposed it, they argued against it, and I was very proud to get the support of both Republicans and Democrats, get bipartisan support. We passed that legislation into law. And then I was at Fort Hood when those Purple Hearts were awarded, and the opportunity with the family members to simply say to each of them, number one, thank you. But number two, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that it took so many years for your country to acknowledge that your loved one was fighting for this nation and was killed defending this nation. And so that was a major victory. I'm deeply gratified. We're far more focused on defeating our enemies. That should be
Yes.
the goal of the military.
What can the
I'm
grassroots
sorry.
do to
Thanks,
help?
guys. We've got to get going. Thank
Can I
you.
just get a picture with you? Somebody take a picture. It's identified.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Great, thank
Thanks
you.